Hiya, I'm Fernie. July's has ended and with it Artfight season has come to a close. This has been my third year doing Artfight and it's been so much fun, so I thought I'd make a video on it. Before we get into things, some of you watching this may be wondering what Artfight is. Feel free to skip the timestamp shown on screen here if you already know the gist of things, but for everyone else, Artfight is a yearly art event that runs throughout the whole of July. You put your characters up on your profile, people draw call out of them, and you draw theirs in return. The gimmick is that it's staged like a fight, so drawing someone's character is classed as an attack, and returning their attack is a revenge. That's pretty much all you need to know about it for this video, so let's jump into the speed paints. The first piece I drew for Artfight this year was actually for someone who attacked me last year. I managed to get around to revenging everyone apart from one person during the 2024 Artfight, so I thought that drawing that person a late revenge would be a nice way to start off this year, plus their OC Uxue is awesome. At the start of this month I was having a bit of trouble with art block, as I jumped straight into Artfight after finishing my previous video, and particularly this first drawing was tougher than it should have been. The impression I got from the character description is that Uxue was similar to a forest spirit of sorts, so I wanted to capture a peaceful and mystical atmosphere in this piece. I think I succeeded in that in the end, though, as you can see from the time-lapse, it took a lot of iterating and deleting and redoing bits of the piece until I was happy with it. When I'm art blocked I generally try to draw anyway and it usually works out, but this piece was really fighting me. Except for the trees. Trees are one of my favourite things to draw and I almost never have a serious amount of trouble with them. Uxue's character page said that the forest they live in is themed after the Arati forest, which, after a bit of googling, I learned is a beech and fir forest in northern Spain known for being wild and mysterious. So, for the trees here I referenced some pictures of ancient and twisted beech trees, and I love how they turned out. My second attack was on Anelie Ray's OC Cat. I've been a huge fan of their videos for many years now, so when I found them on Artfight I knew I had to draw one of their OCs. This piece went a lot more smoothly than the first, with no major hurdles to cross whilst drawing it. My personal goal for this year was 20 attacks, same as last year. However, I had much less time to complete them this time round as I didn't have access to my drawing tablet from the 20th of July. 20 attacks in 19 days wasn't impossible by any means, but it did mean I had to draw at least one per day. To save my sanity, I gave myself the time limit of 3 hours max per piece to stop myself from doing anything crazy detailed or complex. Artfight for me has always been a time to draw a lot with low stakes. The art I make during it doesn't have to be perfect, and is a good time to experiment with things like brushes, backgrounds, colours, etc. I'm not happy with every single piece that I made during Artfight this year, but I don't have to be. Learning from the experience and enjoying myself were the two major goals, and I accomplished both, so it was well worth the effort. For the majority of these pieces I did a very simple background consisting of a few fun shapes and lines. There's only a few, like Uxue, where I did something more complex. However, River was another exception to the rule. River is my friend's OC and this is their first time doing Artfight, so I wanted to go all out on the composition in this one. My plan for this attack was to make something like a poster or magazine cover, with text playing key compositional role as well as the drawings. I really should have planned this piece out a bit more than the rough idea I had in my head. When I started out on this attack I'd had an idea for the character drawings, but nothing for the background apart from a sort of window looking into the void on the left. I tried covering both the top and bottom background segment of the canvas in clouds, but ended up foregoing that idea in favour of some random text spanning across the screen on the bottom one. I also added a little Employee of the Month behind the close-up of River, as a nod to the fact they work in a cafe. I just drew a simple half-body pose for the next two characters. I was feeling a bit art-blocked again and wanted something easier and more in my comfort zone to do. Both of these characters are the main characters from comics I've read. Griff is from Skynet's comic, Sinner's SMP, and Flowers from localveggietables comic, Flowers Archive. I'll have links to both of these in the description as well as the socials of all the people whose characters I'm drawing in this video. I really enjoyed drawing both Flowers and Griff's hair. Flowers is very long and smooth and I use a lot of curved and flowy lines for it. I tried to make the hair ends rounded instead of sharp, which hopefully gave them a sort of flower petal feel. For Griff's hair I leaned in completely the other direction, lots of straighter lines and sharp angles, with the chunks of hair coming to spiky points. For Griff's coat collar, I employed the technique I usually use to draw grass to create the fluffy texture I needed, which worked much better than I thought it would. I also, again, did very simple backgrounds for both of these drawings, a fancy yellow shape with more sharp points for Griff, and a bit of the screen tone brush for Flower. I drew the next character on the same day as Attack on Flower, and for some reason decided to go all out with both a full body pose and perspective. I'm a big fan of the outfit Drew has here, and I have drawn a few characters wearing variations of a shirt, suspenders and blazers before, so this is probably a good design to pick for doing a more complex pose. I was certainly skirting on my 3-hour time limit by the end of this one, which is why the ledge Drew is sitting on isn't more detailed than it is, but it isn't the focal point of the piece anyway, so it's fine. I switched to using a thinner brush size for this piece due to the smaller details needed, but I found I actually preferred that size and kept it like that for almost every piece afterwards. For the final touches to the piece, I drew in the trouser stripe for the multiplier layer. They are a great help for conveying the perspective in the piece, so I appreciate that design detail. I finished off the background with some clouds that lead the eye towards Drew's face, our focal point in this piece, and added in a bit of gradient around the edges as meant to do the same thing. For this character I went back to a more simple half body, not because of art block, but because the character design is so detailed. Skimmeh's character designs are absolutely gorgeous, but I severely underestimated how difficult it would be to draw one without missing out or forgetting any details. I went for something more interesting than just arms by the sides though, since this character has a wonderful pair of mechanical arms that it would be a shame not to show off. I'm always a huge fan of avian characters of any sort, which is why one of the main characters in both of my story/world building projects are a type of avian that fits in with their world's lore. This character is one of the less human avians I've drawn, but since I was only drawing him from the waist up and he's wearing this big floofy jumper, it luckily posed no extra difficulty when drawing him. I gave him an expression that I hope comes across as sleepy rather than confused or worried, but I think the Z's I added to convey that even if the expression doesn't. It was a bit hard to keep track of all the little details in this design, but I went through everything methodically and it ended up turning out great. I think this is mostly due to how good the design is, but this is another one of my favourite pieces to come out of Artfight this year. The next few characters I drew are the Sonas of a couple YouTubers. First up is Mauzu. He has so much lore for his Sona, including an entire language he's made. My Sona also has lore, because I'm incapable of making any character without story, so it was awesome to find someone else who's done that. I experimented a little in this drawing with bigger blocks of solid black colouring as the design already had his face and shadowed like that. I tend to steer away from using solid black to colour, as I find it difficult to use without overpowering the piece, but it worked very well here and honestly wasn't even that noticeable in the end. Mal's clothes are very drapey, so I got up my long thin lines to detail and show the folds of the cloak, and create the impression of the trousers being loose and flowy. As the cloak is a colour that's a little less saturated than the rest of the colours in the design, I made the shadows even more vibrant to blend well with the rest of the drawing. I love how the earrings and hair ornaments turned out. The bright little pops of green and the otherwise brown and black colour schemes stand out really well. Sadly, I messed up and forgot to record the speed paint for this attack, which is a shame since this piece is one of my better ones this Artfight, but you'll see the finished version on screen right now. The character is MarchClub Sona, go watch his videos. The next character I do is my first revenge of the year. It's always really flattering when people choose to draw my characters, so I generally try to revenge everyone who attacks me. Since this character doesn't have that much variation in their base colours, I tried to make the shading more detailed and add some different textures to the different bits. I used some lines in the hair to indicate the flow of it so it's easily distinct from the waistcoat, which is the same colour. As the character has a watery theme, I made the background look like it's in the deep ocean, with some bubbles for extra flair. My initial idea for this attack was, since the character is a dragon who can change between a masculine and a feminine form at will, to have both the forms in this piece. However, I don't really draw men and women that differently from each other, preferring instead to mix and match more feminine and masculine features of my characters regardless of their gender. I tried to keep both versions of Desu looking like the same person, and it kinda seems like I'd drawn them in the same way twice. The more masculine version was meant to be the one on the right, but you can't really tell. Despite that, this piece was one of my favourites to draw. The character design is really good and I love all the colours and little details. I ended up having to miss out a couple of them since I was struggling to fit them all in, but I managed to include most of them. It was a little frustrating having to draw every single thing twice for this piece. I finished the hair, or cloak lining, or collar detail on one version of Desu, and then still had to replicate it on the other version. It was more time consuming than actually annoying though, and the effort was definitely worth it in the end. Desu is somehow the third character with a pink coloured braid or plait that I've drawn this Artfight, and the fourth character with pinkish hair in general. Because of this, I've had a lot of practice drawing plaits recently, and it was very easy to draw another two for the Desu. I finished this piece up with a simple background, rushing my time limit as I did, and now on to the next characters. The next two characters are another couple of revenges. For the character on the left, Cordelia, the main struggle was remembering to include all the little details and making sure their hair looked okay. The rest of the drawing went very smoothly though, particularly the flowers, as flowers are one of my favourite things to draw. I'm a fan of Cordelia's headpiece in this design. The spiky metal bits combined with the flowers look very cool. Their colour palette was also very nice to work with. The blues and purples complement the gold accents nicely. I was obviously having a good day for colours, since I love how the ones from the character on the right, Macy, came out as well. I think I managed to get just the right shades for the shadows on the skin and hair. Macy is a ghost hunter, so I drew a couple of honestly completely non-threatening ghosts behind her for the piece's background. The next character is Keith Wenzo Lunus, who is apparently part of a superhero group and has a robotic arm and fire powers. The thing I enjoyed most about drawing her was her hair. As you will see shortly, it's this wonderful blue shade, and the hair texture and length meant I could add a lot of nice curvy lines for detail. Their robotic arm took me a little bit of trial and error to figure out how it all connected up, but I think I've got it looking okay in the end. I used more geometric shapes and straight lines in the shading on the arm to better suggest that it's man-made. I also solely used hard edges in the shading here for the same reason. Since Lunus has fire powers, and because it contrasts nicely with her hair, I made the background a bright orange colour. The shape is a rectangle this time, since it fit nicely with the composition, and I went around the bits of the character too close in colour to the background with a white border to help them stand out. This was the attack where I may have got a little carried away and gone just a bit over my 3-hour time limit. I hadn't drawn anything with a full background in a few days, so I was already in the mood to do one, and then I read the comic this character comes from, and let me tell you, the backgrounds in it are absolutely gorgeous. It's set in this post-apocalyptic world overgrown with nature, and oh, the art is just so stunning. After reading through all of the chapters of the comic available, I picked this character to draw since, you guessed it, I really like avians. Amusingly, almost every part of drawing the character other than the wings was difficult. I don't know if I'm just unused to drawing the head from that specific angle, or if the hairstyle was particularly different to what I normally draw, but I struggled a lot with a ton of things I don't usually tend to struggle on, such as the ear placement and the hair. It took me around 2.5 hours to do the line art on the character for this piece, which is probably where most time could have been saved, but then again the next thing I did was go ahead and spend another hour and a half on line art for the trees and grass, so I think this piece was always destined to take too long. In the opening chapter of the comic, there's these trees with these eye-shaped swirls in the bark, and that really stuck with me, so I tried to mimic that here on the trees in this piece. I also added some moss and mushrooms to them for fun extra detail. The character I'm drawing here, Ren, is a graffiti artist, and a lot of his references showed him with a paint can, so I splashed a bit of paint on his fingers and had him kind of absent-mindedly doodling on the path he's sitting on. I mostly used shades of green and brown for the colours, but I made the eyes on the moss and the trees blue to match the paint and the label on the paint can. I admit I slightly rushed the colours, but I think they still mostly turned out fine. There's a lot of inconsistencies in the lighting, and the piece could be brighter overall, but I'm generally very happy with it. After the huge piece that I just completed, I was definitely in the mood to do something simpler again, and luckily when I woke up that morning, 2 people had attacked me, and I was ready to take revenge. This character's owner had very detailed references for him, showing all the little details of a design, like the armband thing and the little accessory on his glasses that I add in later. There were also detailed references for his eyes and eyelashes, which I tried to follow as best as I could in my style. I also love the little creature or whatever the eyes belong to on his armband. I'm not entirely sure what it is, or what it's doing there, but it has this tiny little smile and these big eyes. This piece is another revenge, and I think the most unique piece I did for Artfight this year, as I coloured the entire thing in grayscale. This was partially due to me trying to keep it under 3 hours, and partially due to the reference sheet being traditional art, which meant it was harder for me to see what the colours were meant to be. I didn't quite manage to keep it under 3 hours in the end, but I think it was well worth the extra time I spent on it. In the attack on me that this is revenge for, the artist drew my AC Forest twice, with a full body pose for each. Upon seeing they had a character with an alternate supervillain identity, I had to draw both the civilian and villain form of their character. I started out with a quick sketch to get the general idea of the pose down, then went into line art. I gave the hair on the villain form some more movement than the civilian one to further differentiate the two from each other, and to make the villain one seem more dramatic. Not that it needs it with the design being so ominous in the first place. I love the mask design, it's very spooky. Since the reference sheet showed a city in the background, I took inspiration from that and added in some crates for the civilian form to sit on, and some blocky shapes in the background that mimic buildings, billboards, train pipes, etc. I then went in and quickly laid down the flat colours in grayscale for the characters, and with the final couple of touches, I was finished. This attack was the 3rd revenge in a row and the 5th character with pink hair this Artfight. I started out with a quick draft of how I wanted the piece to look, like usual, before starting on the line art. I really love the hair in this piece, it's very flowy and came out perfectly. The character information for Vittoria said the new outfits for her were welcome, so I happily got out my character designing skills to draft an outfit for her. This character's fashion sense reminds me a lot of the clothes that Sylvia and species generally wear in my main world-building project, so I'd drawn a lot of the things in that style before. I gave her a shirt with these sleeves that open into a wide ruffled bit on the lower half of the arm, and paired it with a red corset and simple black trousers. I changed the outfit a little bit as I drew Vittoria in it, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. I think the shading worked really well in the piece. I used a lot of soft edges in the hair and clothing, and they look good, if I do say so myself. I added the final touch to the piece with a background element consisting of a circle with a light pink to purple gradient in it, and that's another piece done. The next character is Nville, as they see, Lawson. I drew a simple little headshot for this one as I was really on a time limit by this point. I drew both this piece and the piece after this on the final day I was able to draw for Artfight this year, aka the 19th of July, so I tried not to do anything complicated and instead just focus on capturing the characters as best as I could with the time I had. Lawson has a cool pole arm that I'd have drawn if I had more time, but I'm still happy with how the attack turned out. Lawson's hair was my favourite thing in this piece, it's very shapy. And now we're finally on to the last attack of the year, the 20th. This character's another YouTuber Sona, this time belonging to Cozy Draws. I was watching one of her videos while drawing this and referencing her Sona on that as much as I was referencing the character sheet actually on Artfight, so sorry if their design is slightly outdated. I only noticed after I'd drawn it that she doesn't have the choker in the Artfight sheet, but I don't think there were any other differences. The character design is very cute, and I especially enjoy drawing the hairstyle. I leaned into pink a little more in the shadows than both the clothing and the hair to add a bit more vibrancy to the piece since her clothes are quite monotone. I almost forgot the heart-shaped ahoge on the top of her head, but thankfully remembered to add it in the end. A few circle shapes for the background later, and that's the final piece of this year's Artfight complete! Thank you for sticking around until the end of the video, and I hope the speed paints weren't too fast, considering I had to fit so many into a decent video length. I honestly enjoyed working on all these pieces, but I think either of these two could be my favourite. Comment down below which one you liked best. I'll be going back to my main world building project and redesigning the villains in my next video. Here's a couple teasers. I'm aiming to get that video out sometime in late August or early September, so until then drink some water and maybe check out one of my other videos if you enjoyed this one. Goodbye!